Okay, so we seem to be in action. Yeah, that was a nightmare. For anybody listening, we managed to conduct an entire interview yesterday, and it didn't record. We flubbed it, and then we spent a better part of an hour and a half figuring out how to do what seems to come naturally to thousands of people the world over with their podcasts. Not that I consider this a podcast exactly, in case you're wondering what's happening here. I'm not sure how regular a feature this will be for the Peer Hat Blackstage blog. We'll just see, I guess. At any rate, I'm speaking to Karl D'SIlva, a musician for whom I personally have a great deal of regard. We've hosted him at the Peer Hat on the Black Stage several times, and hope, viral conditions allowing, to do more so. I'll do more of that in the future. Karl has just released his new EP called Disappear, so it seemed like an ideal time to try this out, see how it goes. Forgive the sound quality, it's no doubt not going to be 100% what you're used to if you're a podcast maniac, but this is less for that. This is more about my crackling voice and Karl's crackling voice being emitted from somewhere in the psychosphere for you to tune into and possibly glean something from. Anyway, so hello Karl, hello, that's my intro done. I would say, how are you? But I mean, it's probably fairly obvious after that, the toll that took on both. So, yeah. So I guess we should jump right into it. Music. Why do we, and why do you in particular? Why do you do this? Why do you do this thing? And I asked this question yesterday, and you know, it's the best place to start, I think, with the whys. So, go ahead.
I mean, my answer's always unwavering that I do it because I have to, really.
Yeah.
I have, feelings that I can only really get through in my work.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to do it, really. That's the only explanation I can give about that.
Yeah, I think I'll touch a little further on what and why it is that any musician, or in particular yourself, feels this. You hear this from people who are driven. I have to do it. I have to do it. I'm very curious as to get into the nitty gritty behind that. I want to understand that. It may be ineffable, as they say, but well, how about this then? What got you started on the path, so to speak? When did the penny first drop?
Well, I grew up in a house where it was played constantly. So my earliest memories are of hearing music. And when I was a child, before I ever played anything, I used to, I would hear melodies that weren't.
What was being played in the house?
No, I would hear melodies that weren't there in the world. They were only in my head. So since I was a child, I've heard music. Concurrently to being enthralled by music outside of myself since I was a child, and before I ever played music and learned how to play music, I've always heard it.
That's a very haunted way of beginning a musical career, to be taught by the ghost in the house, so to speak.
But in terms of what I was actually hearing, stuff that would have been played, The Doors, "Riders on the Storm" was one of the first songs piece of music I can ever remember hearing. About 3 years old,
Yeah.
getting my dad to keep turning it over on tape in the car. David Bowie, Billy Idol, Michael Jackson, the music of Joy Division. Really, when I was quite young, about 10 years old.
You heard Joy Division when you were 10?
Yeah.
Oh, that is great fortune. I wasn't turned on to that until I was like 17. I mean, it was a big deal when it was, and then it came in a big.
Yeah. Well, because my older cousin Daryl, who he lived through the post punk period, and he came of age. He was a teenager when punk happened, and he was in post punk bands in Sheffield in the through the early 80s and into the end of that decade. And my dad was into Joy Division at the time when they came out. So having him around and then my dad around, and then it was being played in the house.
That's tremendous. That is tremendous. It's a beautiful.
It's their music in particular. Like I mean, now we're 20 years into the 21st century, and we all know how much that music's been played and played and played, and how many people it's influenced. It's like water really at this point, but still, I can listen to Transmission, and I still get goosebumps. And it's like, it's 23 years that I've been listening to that piece of music, and at the end when everything's kicking off, it's like all the guitars are going off and the piano's in, right, like the last minute of the song. For me, that's like that's peak transcendence in music, in my opinion.
The way I wanted to conduct this interview, I like to use the songs as a little bit of a linchpin, if you will. Without robbing them of the je ne sais quoi, so to speak.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever read, don't know how much of a Beatles man you are, but Ian McDonald did a marvelous book called Revolution in the Head, which traced the history.
Yeah.
It's a great book. Trace the history of the Beatles via the songs, and through harsh analysis. And if I could do anything like half as, or even a tenth as good as that, that would be ideal. So before I move to the sort of tracing Karl D'SIlva through his music, what was the experience like of recording this EP Disappear like for you? What was it like?
Well, they were all written within a 2-year period. So from January, I was maybe like very late 2015. So the last month of 2015 through to early 2018. So just over 2 years. Written Devotion was written. I made that in Leeds, and then the others were made in Islington Mill when I moved there moved to Manchester in late 2016, October 2016. But they were all finished off at Dean Honer's in Sheffield, his studio called the Bowling Green.
What was the experience like of living in Islington Mill?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, I first went there when I played with Drunk in Hell in spring 2015. The first time I ever went there, the only way I could describe it, it felt like going home. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd never. It was sort of the thing that I was you talk about right place, right time. I was waiting for that. It's like that was, just as crucible.
It holds a very, very fun place, I think, in the in the mythology of the city of Manchester, which is, of course, you know, I think central to certainly this blog and where it's coming from. Holds a very fond place in my heart. There's no doubt about that.
But yeah, all the people I met through there have become really close friends. So Gareth Smith, who I work with in his project Vanishing, he's a really close friend and a very inspiring person to be around. You know, in terms of his writing, he's been a really big influence on the way I think about words. Definitely, without a shadow of a doubt.
Gareth's got he's got an unusual gift. His wordplay, especially. There are a few poets in this city, and he is one of them. I
think he's a genius, really, if I'm being totally honest with you.
Yeah, there's a lot of that around too. So you mentioned the first track on the EP, Devotion.
Mm.
As we were talking about, you were mentioning about communicating things in music which you couldn't necessarily communicate in life. Would you say music's a language? And if so, what is it communicating?
In my opinion, every art form that exists,
Yeah.
whether it's that deals with representational forms like painting, theatre, film, music, each art form is really just a lens that's put in front of the creator that they refract their own lived experience through.
Yeah.
So yeah, music is a language. It's very specific things that music does and contains: harmony, rhythm, melody, timbre, texture, sound design. But there's something deeper. There's more than the notes, I think, but that's true than any art form that maybe helps to speak to the human condition. You would like to think that it's more than what it is. Do you get what I mean? It's more than what can be defined with our limited language that we discuss semiotics.
Yeah, we come back to that word transcendence again. I think what's interesting about music with lyrics is we're talking about poetry accentuated by music. You come back to the dim and distant past, certainly in this country, and your bards and your minstrels. I mean, about the words, and then the music would be like, if we're going to be talking about a wave, then we're going to need a piece of music that brings that to mind and accentuates that concept. With that in mind, what is the writing process like for you? How would you describe that?
In the most sort of unpretentious way, it comes very vividly, like a vision. It's so clear to me that I can see it, like I can just see it hanging in the air in front of me. Like,
is that coming to you? Do you have to? Let me see how to put this. Does that happen spontaneously, like if you're in a newsagent, say, or buying a loaf of bread, or do you have to say sit down and maybe meditate to get that? When does that happen?
I mean, obviously, when I've got something, I'll chip away on it and I'll polish it.
Yeah.
In order to turn it into the thing, but whenever I try and force it, I mean, this, I'm only speaking for myself, but whenever
Yeah.
I try to force it, everything closes up really, and it just doesn't. It won't.
So what is forcing it for you? So if, for example, you say, right, tonight I'm going to write a song.
Yeah, like I have to sort of be. The way I would describe it is, my consciousness is focused enough so that I'm tuned in to where the ideas come from, but then I'm relaxed enough and I'm letting go enough that I'm not grasping for it. It's a very, I mean, it is very paradoxical the way to describe it. I have to be letting go enough and unself-conscious enough that it will flow, but then also focused enough with my awareness that I'm in that concentrated state.
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
you get what I mean?
I do, yeah. I mean, when you speak like that, I wonder if that's the attraction of like drugs to artists when they're sort of trying to find that sense of, for example, if we take like the idea of the shaman and he's getting himself out of his mind in order to make
Oh, do
music.
you mean like altered states?
Yeah, I mean, what?
Well,
Talk to me about altered states.
well, yeah. I mean, I'm very into that. I'm attracted to that, to getting that through music, and music does make me feel those sorts of things completely sober, and I'm pretty much teetotal in my life now. But you know, there have been periods when I've experimented
Yeah,
with getting altered states through substances,
I too have experimented with being teetotal.
and and yeah, that is something that I totally can get and and look for in music. You know, like, well, today I was listening to music in 12 parts by Philip Glass,
Oh yeah,
just on the hi-fi in the living room, and it was, you know, quite a loud volume, and it just totally put me into this like peak state uh, of consciousness. I
yeah.
was like weeping as I was like peaking on
It, it,
hallucinogens or something, but I was totally sober.
it's a paradoxical thing to think that. I mean, the music is kind of the thing that's going to put you in the altered state of consciousness. Yet, in order for the music to happen, then it's almost like you've got to that altered state's like it's got to approach you somehow. Like, I think that's like it reminds me. I think I said this yesterday in the Flubbed interview. It reminds me of some of the things a fellow called Jacques Vallée wrote about, and had this idea that in the altered state, how and then there's obviously a great host of ways of inducing that. You know, I mean, exhaustion, pain, sexual pleasure, fear, and of course, whatever it is that music ignites in us. That was when a person might experience contact with, say, a spirit, or
Mm,
later on a fairy, or later on from that a UFO. And
mm.
I think I love. Again, this is something I personally find really attractive, but I love the idea of music being a UFO. You know, it's like you're sort of tuning into this thing, and it's kind of abducting you, and you're sort of like, okay, and you're coming back. You're not necessarily being anally probed by it, but you're certainly bringing something back. And
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as much as my work is, you know, my words and my melodies, you know, as much as they are my songs, I can't. Where I go when I'm writing, I'm not really there. If you get what I mean.
yeah, I do. I know exactly what you mean.
I go somewhere else, and then
I think that's pretty obvious watching you on
I feel
stage.
like
But
I'm just pulling it out of I'm pulling it out of the air, or maybe it's I'm not really pulling it. It's coming. It's, you know, it's
Yeah,
sort of writing me. I'm not really writing it, if you get what I mean.
I think I do. I think I do. I'm pretty sure we're on the same page there. Um, so just before I move on, in the song Devotion, there's a line, and I'm not
Mm,
going to analyze, ask you to explain the line as such, but it's hold your hands up into the light, tear your heart out in sacrifice. Hold your
mm,
hands up into the light, tear your heart out. Now, assuming that one isn't literally prepared to tear out one's heart, unless
mhm.
I'm being assumptive saying that, um, to whom are you sacrificing, and what does sacrifice mean for the artist?
And
I said this one yesterday, and I know it was as equally as morbid, but please, wax.
okay, so it's purely talking about the act of creation, not about, we're not talking about sacrificing a real life
Yeah,
or death
yeah, yeah,
sense.
yeah. I
Purely
mean,
talking about,
unless that's what
yeah,
you meant by I presumed you didn't. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Uh, Not that that's what it means in the song, because it's up to you to
yeah, yeah, yeah. Of
determine
course.
what that means for you. But for me, when you're making work, you are sort of, if it's, it only really works if it's true.
Yeah,
If you're really feeling that feeling, and because I can smell it when I'm a consumer, and when I'm taking in other people's work, I can smell it. Um, Coming a mile off if something's not true
yeah.
and not truly felt. So I can only, you know, it wouldn't feel right for me as a creator to not really go there and go to those places, uh, to 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 bring those feelings forth, because although I, I'm uh, we all of us in our lives, we all deal with darkness and light to varying degrees, and we all
Is
have those two elements to
isn't there
deal
the
with.
danger
So
that you know?
that's where it's coming from, really.
Yeah, isn't there? I don't know if it's a danger or not, but because you're not limited by experience or something happening materially speaking, that in order to go to that place,
Mm,
you could actually send yourself to somewhere that might be damaging or troubling. I mean, I can speculate 1,000 times on various artists who, I mean, we all know, the famous tales of artists who, like Icarus, have flown too high and plunged down in flames. Um, and and I listen to a song like Gemini that I think it's fair to say is intimate, and the audiences connect to the raw honesty in it. Um, do you not? Do you never wear a mask in your art to protect you?
mm. I mean, the 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 in live performance, the performed version of, like, of of the character, which is the voice,
Yeah,
if you're a
yeah.
songwriter, that that's just it's a concentrated, bigger in some cases, or smaller if you, depending on what you want that character to be. But it's a concentrated version, a distillation of yeah. I don't want to use words like spirit.
Yeah, it's
You,
okay.
you get what I'm driving at there.
I don't think we really have. This is one of the problems of having these kind of conversations. I think we lack a good vocabulary for it. Actually,
Language fails. You get there's a point where language fails to describe what you're actually trying to, and then you start. That's why you sing about it, really.
Yeah. No, it's curious because I mean that
if I didn't have to sing it, I would speak it out loud, or I would write it down. I
that
think
would make
that
speaking
thing that
it.
we
I think
were talking about, where I said that I have to do it. If I didn't, that it's looping back to that question where you asked why do it, and it's because I have to sing it. I have to sing it. But no, to answer the question, I try to be as true as possible in my work.
Yeah. Okay.
Really. I mean, although I'm influenced by, obviously someone like David Bowie is a massive influence on me, but I'm not really the me that the voice of the songs isn't like a Ziggy.
Obviously, that's one of the appeals. If one goes to see you play live or listen to the music, certainly watching you play live, one of the appeals is seeing somebody give that, as I mentioned earlier. And again, that loops back to something that we mentioned earlier on, and that word transcendence. So, what does that word mean to you as regards your music? And in general, in fact, I mean, is it possible for a start? And if it, but I mean, I guess you have to define what we mean by it. Is it meaningful?
I mean, I'm very lucky that throughout the course of playing music, I've had some very extremely unique live performance experiences. So,
Well, for those listening, I think Karl did actually baptize the Peer Hat. I think he may have been the first person to play, playing saxophone with Thurston Moore, I believe, which was quite
and a very good friend of mine, Lucy Johnson, as well, who's an amazing musician.
Lucy, yeah, absolutely. Lucy was, she was down to play with us a little while. I'll get her one day. I'll get her at the Peer Hat again. That I'd say that was, if ever there's a sense of serendipity or synchronicity, and you're wondering exactly how something's going to turn out, and you're in your pathetic concrete floored basement hovel, and you're thinking, "Oh fuck, how's this going to go?" And I'm not to put too heavy a spin on it, but Thurston Moore walks in. It's kind of it was a beautiful moment, and you were part of that. And yeah. Anyway, sorry. Continue anyway with transcendence.
Yeah, and so. Well, transcendence is those experiences where the self is dissolved, isn't it? You dissolved into something that's larger than yourself.
The material self is a thing, I think. I mean, it's not really of concern what I think about it, but there's certainly in this conversation and in your music, there's a skein of the mystical, and we're talking about I'm trying to nail down the unnailable in some senses. So it's trying to put a cloud in a bag, but we're talking about songs you having to do things, and this has got to be that you can't force things, and it's as if the songs themselves have their own agency. And can a song be alive, Karl?
Well, it's alive if it continually can, at the moment that you listen to it, that it can repeatedly be vital
Yeah.
and release meaning. So yeah, they can be alive in that sense.
Can they be alive in the other sense?
Well, I think they, for me at least, I feel like they contain all the songs that I love the
Yeah.
most. I feel like they really do contain, uh, a, they contain the spirit of the people that made them.
Yeah. I think
Because anything that moves you to 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 tears. If I think about the songs that really have opened my heart up, um, any music that moves you to tears, there's that's a very, very, very powerful thing.
it's
And
it's
I don't think it's overblown to say things like that. I think it's a beautiful thing to say that music contains, contains a sense of spirit.
yeah. I think and again, this is something I mentioned yesterday. I'm mad into all reading various bits and bobs. Um, and my library's heaving uh, with books on the subjects of magic and animism, the occult, and all this kind of exciting stuff. And that thing, whatever it is that makes the hair stand on end, there's this idea, and I said this yesterday. Like it was, I think, put forth by Robert Graves in The White Goddess, that um, and stated by poets through the ages, that a poem is not a poem unless it addresses the fundamental question of what happens when we die. And there is this sense of loss in your songs, and again, we're talking about transcendence. Um, and the EP itself is called Disappear. And um, and then you get to a song where it's like Immaterial, all these kind of things all sort of like have this follow this track.
Well, I'm very on a on an actual broad spectrum. If you really want me to go on a tangent
I love you
here,
to go
I
on a
am
tangent.
in all of the songs.
Yeah.
I'm attracted to language that's driving towards that space that you've just described,
Yeah.
the ineffable and the thing that you can't quite grasp it, but you know that it's making you feel something, but it's like it's slipping through your fingers like smoke.
Yeah.
Like
It,
I'm trying to get through that
it's beautifully put. It's beautifully
by
put.
using imagery. I think you get to that by using strong imagery
Yeah,
that paints a vivid picture within the listener's mind's eye. I mean, I taught it in a written interview a while back that I want people to be able to see the lyric in the
shamanic.
act.
That is shamanic. That is shamanic. That's,
Yeah.
I mean, you're taking people. Yeah, I mean, without over egging the pudding. Yeah, I think I'm hearing that, and it's something that I think is really vital to music, art as it stands right now in communities like the Pier Hat and across the country. There are nodes here and there, where I think this kind of artists are starting to explore the mythology of their own lives, the lives around them, and the place that they inhabit.
I mean, when I'm in the act of writing, and also in the listener's mind,
Yeah.
it's have to be able to see the lyric, both when a listener's hearing it and when I'm in the act of pulling it out of wherever it's coming from.
Yeah, yeah. So, just as I mentioned, the song Immaterial. My question is this, and it's still again within the same ballpark, the transcendent ballpark, so to speak. I was curious what role you felt that digital technology and AI, for that matter, what role that has to play in transcendence. Is it a wrong turn? And if it's not, where do we draw the line in terms of our use of it in art? Or do we draw a line?
Well, I mean, when they talk about AI, where we are at this moment in time with AI isn't even something you could call intelligence. Do you get what I mean? The way that it's spoken about is very much a marketing term now. It's not really at a point technologically where you can say it has intelligence
No, no.
yet.
Yet.
That's
I guess I'm using it in the reduced. I know exactly what you mean. There's a lot of hype spoken about it and such and projection. I guess I'm thinking about it in terms of the very simplistic kind, comparatively, artificial intelligences that you might get with with your Abletons or your Cubases or your Logics or that kind of thing. Does that do you think there's not that it's is there a downside to that? I mean, obviously, I mean your music. I hear two different things. That you often when you play live, you're often alone, so you've obviously got to rely to a certain extent on what you have. Um,
mm-hmm.
I listen back to what you're playing on record, and it seems that's something you'd rather you was it fair to say you'd shy away from using live musicians in positions you otherwise wouldn't? Is that do you use technology purely as a stand-in um, for other human beings? Because it's difficult.
Well, there is on on three of the songs on the EP, there is real drums
Yeah,
and bass guitar on there, played
you can hear it.
by John Perry of Nod and Al Wilson from Gold, and they both play together in a band called Shook,
Oh
which
yeah.
is a very good group. I'm really a fan of their music. But no, not really. I don't shy away from it. I think that you can make great music on a guitar, or you can make great music without even touching an instrument, just completely on your laptop. And I've got friends that do that. You know, a friend of mine, Ryan Trainer, his music, it only exists within patches that he writes in Max MSP,
Yeah.
and it's different every time he runs the patch. And but you know any methodology you use, whether it's doing what he does or whether you're using a guitar or whether you're writing for a string quartet or you're banging some rocks together and screaming, you know, it's you the methodology is just the means to the end of, of, of
What
getting
about
out
something like
what you want to get out.
quantization or sort of like, or even playing to a click track, for example? I mean, not when I my own sort of recording. I did an album at one point, and I can really hear a difference between stuff where was being played to a click track for the convenience of being able to sort of like cut and paste and punch in, etc. This is what I'm trying. And I also had a conversation. I mean, Damo Suzuki is a fellow who's played, I think, with just about everybody in Manchester at this point.
I
But
played when I was about 18 years old. It's the first time. I played with him twice.
well, he stood by whilst I presume he agreed with the person who was speaking. He passed his wisdom on, and he was saying, "Listen, man." I think it was like his driver, and Damo was just nodding away. He's like, "Don't electronic beats, man. Make anything but electronic beats. You gotta hit a pan, hit a cup." Like, and I was like, "Whoa!" And at that point as well, I was kind of like well into sort of like, right, I'm getting into this process beat creation thing. It really threw me one. Do you think that's what do you stand on that? Is that I mean, is that just, do you think, purely a reference to that kind of zero mistake kind of thing, zero error kind of
So what we're actually talking about there when you're
yeah,
discussing that, you're discussing on the grid
yeah. Go
digital,
there.
right? You're discussing digital audio workstation, which is
Yeah,
a timeline-based thing
yeah,
where everything can be snapped to a timeline. Now,
yeah,
for me, I am of the persuasion where time is a mutable thing and it
yeah.
exists on a sliding scale,
Mm.
because I'm very fortunate that I've sort of grown up around uh, being around people like Ryan Trainer and his dad Mark Fell, who have the, that's electronic music where it's completely off the grid and timeline. That, time is a floating point scale, so it's not on the grid. So,
Yes.
and also through learning how to play jazz and being into jazz from an early age and studying that music, you also, the concept of swing, where time is a mutable thing that contracts and expands, musical time.
Mm.
So for me, I'm just not. And also I reject any and all sort of form of dogmatic ways of looking at things. So any
Yeah.
position where it's like, I have to do this, but then I can't do that. Well, I'm just not interested in that. I would rather be be flexible and for things to be mutable than being the sort of, oh, guitars are bad and
Yeah.
oh yeah, and I'm only going to use quantization or
I understand.
I don't really think of things in those sort of black and white extremes, because that doesn't allow for any nuance.
No, it doesn't. It's kind of dualistic, and I think
Yeah.
that's hopefully something we're starting to leave behind in, art and music at this point. I mean, and culture for that matter is my,
But
my,
we've
my
sort of gone off tangent there, really. I mean, um, yeah, I mean, I've used live musicians on the record. The the record itself is, it is electronic music. Um, it, it it all exists on the grid, but I'm not really beholden to that. If you get what I mean, like, let's just technically take a track like Gemini. So, I uh, when I wrote the drum beat for that on my MPC pad, um, I heard it in my head and I had to work out how to play it. So I wasn't it wasn't like I was looking at the timeline. That came, when I arranged the song, then that happened. But in the moment that I was creating it, I was just making something that I heard.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and there's no doubting. I mean, I don't think I've made any bones about how much I love that song. I can often be heard singing it in the peer hat. It's a permanent earworm for me. And
Conversely, a lot of the patterns that do come naturally to me and that I do hear, and this is probably an influence from listening to lots of sort of, rhythmically complex music like Ortega and lots of jazz and can and loads of stuff from the 20th century that's like that. My brain does fall into these sort of into patterns that aren't just get a standard boom boom like I have to always put in like an extra beat in there or something to make it feel like the drum beat is a catchy thing in and of itself.
Yeah,
I like to make the drum beats feel like they're a hook as much as the melody is a hook.
You mentioned jazz. Jazz has been an important part of your construction as an artist. Is that fair to say?
Hugely,
building, yeah.
I mean, in the term, from the way it's influenced my sense of melody, my hearing in terms of like harmony and things like that, and my sense of rhythm. I mean, I've consumed a lot of jazz in my throughout the course of my life, and I've got a lot of it under my fingers as well. From studying at Guildhall when I was younger.
And how was that? How did that that training, has that served you well, would you say?
I mean, well, the thing that they're always, because I studied classical music as well at Leeds College of Music and during my undergraduate degree at York, doing composition there. The thing that's always been driven towards is it's hearing.
Yeah.
I really take umbrage with, like, for me, it was very much a sort of old school composer way of being taught, where it's like the way they were taught in the olden days, which the time of Bach and people like that, where it's about hearing. It's not like the theory. The theory won't write you a piece of music. The theory is just there to hone your ears to a point where they're sharp, and in your inner ear, which is called audiation, is not, you're not constrained by anything.
That's a good
Your imagination
people. Audiation.
in what you're able to perceive.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'll move on a little further. The song "Mass Communication." In that song, I'm getting the impression that there's a commentary being made upon culture and society. I think anyone who hears it or listens to it will probably recognise and empathise with the things you talk about in that piece. Now, what I want to ask is this: and do you feel that this kind of this dreadful technocratic sort of dehumanizing web that seems to have arisen in the 21st century, do you feel that the artist has a role in that? And by which I mean, by engaging in an artifact like rock and roll, which has no doubt at this point become something of a post. Yeah. Are we perpetuating it, and in some way helping to maintain it? And if not, is there a new...
I think art you know, for me personally, I'm not speaking, this is just my opinion,
Yeah.
that I think art, that's dealing with the etheric and, it's channeling lived experiences uh, and dealing with visceral feelings. I think that's always going to be in opposition to ominous forces that are operating clandestinely and that are, inhuman in the worst sorts of ways. It's always going to be, at the other end of the scale to that.
That's, I mean, in that case, would it be fair to say, and let me skip right back to the mystic and the hard to hard to nail down? Would you say there's a Gnostic element to it? I mean, I see like the culture is kind of the demiurge. I think the evil material world or the base material world, and that music is in some way attacking that fortress. Was that fair? Would that be fair to say? Or not necessarily. I mean, because I mean, let's face it. I think that the god of the material universe, the as Philip K. Dick would have put it, the bad god, kind of
Mm.
just have a soundtrack too. And to me, that sounds a lot like uh, uh, the the top 50.
Well,
Or am I
music's
being? Or that's a bit. Again, go ahead, go ahead. I mean, I accept what I say there. Go ahead, smash it to pieces.
music's sacred to me. So, you know, like I said earlier at the start, I have to do it. It's although it is very, I'm making music and it's catchy and it's nice to listen to. The words are there to, you know, I think words are a hammer.
That's very yeah. Okay, yeah, absolutely, and that's really. It seems almost that kind of need for art, words, poetry, music to be a hammer. It seems very much of this moment right now, where we really are in an authenticity crisis. I think.
Well,
Would you
I want to,
culturally, pop culture?
when I say the words are hammer, it's like I want to feel something. I want to feel something, and I want you to feel something. And I want to, I want to be shaken out of this reality, and I want to shake you out of your own reality, and into a more a more charged space where we can fucking feel something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you at one point. The more I thought about this question, the more it almost seems redundant. But you know, I apart from from the touchstones you've already mentioned, um, would you say in terms of influences, is there a science fiction influence maybe on the music at all? Because
Definitely, like 1,000% definitely. Uh, I was very, Blade Runner.
yeah, I hear a lot about.
My older cousin gave me that on a VHS when I was like,
I hope not the one the dreadful one with the narration where he spells it out. I'm a Blade Runner. My job
no,
is to catch
yeah,
replicants.
but you got to think about what era that was. When we, I was 10 in 1997, so it
Yeah,
was version with the voice. That's the first version that I
fair enough. Fair enough. No, of course, and it's still great.
grew to love. Um, but yeah, I mean, the influence of Blade Runner, uh, both in terms of the actual music and the atmosphere of that film and the themes that are in that film on my music can't be overstated. I mean, if you see me play live and you know what I dress like, I'm a total.
I think you've got great fashion sense.
Do you get what I mean?
I know what you mean. Yeah. um, well, moving to the final song on the EP,
Mm-hmm.
Eternity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I th- this song feels very. And I don't mean this literally, but it feels very organic, and it returns that theme again of sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
When I listen to it, I feel like very much like there's the opportunity for some kind of redemption. And am I reading too much into that when I say that?
Um,
Because there's a lot of pain in this EP. I mean, but there's also, and by anyone who's listening, by the way, if you've not heard the EP, that is not to say it's in any way depressing or gloomy. It's not. It's hook laden. But I reached this point in the EP, and I feel like, okay, what is it? What's the crowbar? What is it that? What? How do we move forwards?
how do I move forwards artistically, or how?
Well, you know when sometimes I kind of almost get the two confused when I talk, when I speak about art and music, because um and I should watch myself, because obviously there's a personal alchemy going on, but
Mm,
really when we're talking about, you stood in a community place in the
mm,
basement of the care, for example,
mm.
and people are connecting with what you're saying and how you're performing. I think it becomes a little bit more universal. It feels like, not to, I think, be too didactic about it. I think we mentioned that yesterday again, but there is that sense of empathy.
I mean that song, although the sound world of it is quite murky, and there's actually some quite interesting things happening on that song. If you want me to go
Yeah,
into it in real
please, if you
technical,
want to, I would love you to.
that chorus is a very sort of euphoric, like blinding light filled chorus for me as a listener and as a writer. When I wrote it, I was like, "Whoa!" And well, then to counteract that within the actual production of the song, there's just some cool things happening in there to make it unsettling. So you've got guitar harmonics in there. Uh, there's one loop which is an old loop from an older version of that song, and then there's another version where I just did an alternate tuning and at Dean's and recorded another layer. So you've got these two unsettling, sort of weird, shimmering takes of guitar harmonics going off, and then you've also got an entire all of John and Al's uh, bass and drum tracks just going through the filter bank of a Korg MS-20 and triggering oscillators and the noise generator and being filtered as well. That's the thing that comes in at the start of the track after the harmonics.
Yeah.
And so you've got these sort of weird, like, where it sounds like everything's broken up. In terms of like redemption within my music, although I'm dealing with dark
Yeah, yeah,
themes,
yeah.
these very sort of heavy, dark themes, I always have to have it shot through with light. There has to be some form of light coming through the cracks in that darkness for it to work for me.
Yeah, so it's that it comes to that idea again of that thing trying to avoid a dualistic thing. It's
Yeah,
that's spectrum. I mean, you can hear that actually not in everything you do, to be honest. And that's actually one of the things I do like about it. And now, a lot of the music that I hear on the underground, from certainly from the mill end of the spectrum, is often very dark indeed. And that's not to say to decry it in any shape, way, or form. That that's what initially I was thought well, we're gonna I was keen to hear what you sounded like, and I was shocked because I was like, oh, there's someone writing a tune here. No, and that's not to, again, nothing wrong with sort of like powering through, walls of discordant sort of nightmare sound.
I
But
mean, we can go in deep on that if you want to,
I'd love to.
because I mean, I've had a lot of. I'm not going to go into any biographical details, but I've had a lot of very real life darkness in my life, and had to deal with that. And if you've actually been through things like that, you tend to have a lightness to you. Really, you tend to want to go towards the light. When you've been to hell, you don't want to be in hell
Yeah,
24/7 a day. And if I wanted to, I could very easily, you know, with the resources that I have at my fingertips, I could make the the most evil, bleakest sounding music and harshest sounding thing in the world. But it's just, you know, it's like what I was talking about. The stuff where the life feels like it is. It's in the things that have got the grey area to them. That
the liminal place. I mean,
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's I mean,
All the stuff that I love uh, has got that to it. Like, just to name a few contemporary artists, stuff like Sun, the band Sun. They're like, it's crushing the heavy music, but there's a lightness to it. They've got a sense of humour with how they present themselves.
yeah,
Even Scott Walker, like The Drift.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
Oh, I was
to,
literally
to
just thinking of that.
those are two albums that have like massively influenced me as a songwriter and a musician. And but they're shot through with they've got they're shot through. Any I think any serious anyone who I would view as being a serious artist, they're all like that. They've all they're never the one. They're never the one thing.
No, no,
You know, like Joy Division. You
no.
know, look at
But
you
they get a bad rap, don't they?
yeah, they've made some of the most life affirming, heavy in quotation marks music that's ever been made. But they were just four lads
Yeah.
from two of them from Salford and two of them from Macclesfield. You know,
It's a funny thing
that,
because
that's the thing. I think if we although you can have work can have a sense. It can have a sense of being out of this world and being of containing genius. But
yeah,
I think it's very dangerous to sort of separate the human and because everyone likes to have a laugh. Everyone likes to have a joke.
yeah.
Everyone shits at the end of the day.
Everyone shits, and even your one's perspective on death needs a similar sort of dose of um, of lightness, I suppose.
And
This is an
that's a,
inevitability.
that's a trope that's something I write that's a central crux to my work is death, not being dead, or I want to be dead, but like the, all the stuff around that, because when you're really talking about death, if you're talking about reconciling with impermanence, you're talking about, well, what's memory, and you're talking about what's regret, you're talking about, well, what's been satisfied with your life. You're talking about all these things because they're driving, everyone has that end point of the life, and the closer you get to that, the further away from you you get. You start to have these existential questions.
Yeah.
So when death's present in my work, not because I have a death wish, but death's in my work because I feel vividly alive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's how, what I guess we're struggling with as a culture, as we one being a effective and useful attitudes whilst dying. Our culture's got no good way of dealing with it. Principally, I think because it's relied too much on, well, it's a materialist culture, whether it's capitalist or Marxist or anything in between. Those things I think people are sensing alone don't have the answer. And I'm not to say that I think religion does, in inverted commas, but you said before, you expressed, oh, I don't want to use the word spirit, but we don't have the vocabulary to talk about it, and yet we know intrinsically what a human being needs, and it's not just the physical needs. It's not just a roof. It's not just food, and and the things that keep someone alive. I mean, if anything, I think the situation we're in now is possibly even, it's just displaying that, as people are like, whoa, 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 what the fuck? I kind of really needed people.
I mean, all of the most intense feelings I've ever felt in my life, whether that's intense ecstasy or intense sorrow, on the other side of the coin, that all of that goes into my music.
Again, it's what is it? It's sort of like, I mean, I don't know if I know that there's some relationship to planetary movements. I know that there's a lot of synchronicities and coincidences, so to speak, where we can say that, we can basically track scales, the movement of Venus, for example, all movement of the planets and such. And it's
I
like,
mean, it's more than just pattern recognition, isn't it?
yeah,
Our brain hardwired for pattern recognition, and I think music moves us because of reasons for more than that, because it's more than the notes. It's more. It's more. A paint. Stuff like Francis Bacon's work. It's there's something. Those are charged images,
yeah,
aren't they? And it, I'm trying to think of, like when you like one of my favourite books and a really big influence on me as a writer is not so much in the subject matter of the book, but just how he uses language and what that language does to you psychically, is Vladimir Nabokov's Ardor or Ardor. It's his prose is so vivid, you can almost smell it. And I would recommend anyone that's not read it and is an artist or is interested in the written word and what the power of what words can do within the mind to create vivid images, is to read that book, because it is one of the greatest things ever written down, in my opinion.
again, the books like that, they seem to have an agency of
Yeah,
their own. Um,
crackle. They crackle with a spark and an illuminant energy.
as I say, I think it's really useful and important to assign, um, you know, personhood to things that we otherwise are told not to, or we assume not to. People would say it'd be crazy to give a
Another thing as well, talking on a broad sense of not just talking about specific songs, but I'm always driving towards a sense of spectralism with my music. That's something I'm very attracted to. So, like, you hear it in the music of Glenn Branca, and you hear it in the music of Steve Reich, and you hear it within. Really, it's really present in the work of Joy Division, and it's this sort of this just shimmer where it's like all the notes and the overtones, they cluster together to create something that's this big cloud of sound. And that's something that I'm, well, talking about transcendence, that's the thing I'm always trying to get to, that cloud of huge overwhelming sound that destroys your intellect. It destroys the intellect, and it forces you to feel something.
There was something I meant to ask.
It, it bypasses all the analytical parts of your brain and just cracks you open. So carry on. Sorry.
No. Yeah, I'm just thinking about what you said in relation to what I'm sort of going to say. With these things in mind, where does the artist almost physically stand these days? Like, where does what this, as far as anyone who's in in the industry can tell, or is or adjacent to industry can tell, there isn't one. There's a kind of a black hole with a bunch of sub industries sort of orbiting around it, and kind of who need to pretend that there is one in order for them to keep going. Whether that's from from music venues to music instrument makers to agents, managers, and record companies such as they are. Um, and I think we're increasingly seeing that our culture is approaching a bankrupt status. So artists I admire, they don't see that success that their predecessors saw. Certainly from like 2000 onwards. I mean, it's decreased and decreased. So where does where is the artist's natural place now?
I mean, my natural place is in trying to create a body of work over the course of my life that's a whole body of work, and performing that work for people. I'm only really in it for those sort of reasons, especially at this point in my life, being post 30 years old. I'm I'm a grown up, and I'm in it for grown up sort of true reasons, pure reasons, because this is all that there's ever been for me,
Yeah.
and I'm happy with that. I don't. If even just one person is moved by it, then I feel like I've achieved something, however small that is.
Earlier, you mentioned your cousin Daryl. He seemed fairly interesting. Could you tell me more about him?
Yeah, so he played saxophone. It was the first instrument I ever heard anyone play for real. Was him playing a saxophone when I was probably like 6 years old in the house here, in the spare room, playing a soprano saxophone. And he's an actor now, and he's done a lot of work very well respected in the theatre. So he's been in the RSC and he's played at the National Theatre and
Yeah.
toured all over Europe and America in various theatrical productions. But he used to be a musician in the 80s.
Yeah.
So he played in two groups. One of them was the Anti-Group, which was Addy Newton, who was the singer in Clock DVA. When Clock DVA first broke up, after they made an album called Advantage for Polydor, Addy formed a new group called the Anti-Group, and Darryl recorded two albums with them. One was called The Delivery, which was recorded at one of the very first atonal festivals in Berlin in 1985, and that's a live album. I don't think you can get it, but if you can track down a copy, I think it's a very influential album within that canon of post-punk and industrial music. And then another album that they did called Digitaria, which I think was on Wax Trax. I'm not sure though. I might need to be. It might have been on Wax Trax or it might have been on a different label. But that's music that's based on the Dogon tribe, who they watch Sirius B, even though they don't have a telescope. And it's sort of like, you could say it's like industrial post-punk jazz, free jazz influences with sort of Addy Newton's iconic way of singing and writing lyrics. It's amazing, really. I'd recommend anyone to check that out. And then he also played in a band called Hula, who they were quite a well-known Sheffield post-punk band. He played on an EP called Black Wall Blue, which is great. I'd implore anyone that's that's a fan of Cabaret Voltaire and Clock DVA to check out the Anti-Group, the Delivery, Digitarian albums, and Black Wall Blue by Hula. In fact, all of Hula's stuff, even the stuff that Daryl's not on, is amazing. Stuff like Freeze Out, it's great. It's been a really big influence on me, although it's not apparent. It's there.
Well, I mean, you mentioned his saxophone playing, and that was initially, what you were known for. It was kind of the saxophone go-to man in many ways in the city. But you've kind of consciously moved away from that, haven't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, by the time I left the band that Trumpets of Death mutated into, which was called Bodywork, which is sort of like an electro pop group, I was about 28 at that point, and I just decided that I had to sort of make music on my own, and because I always knew that I could sing, because I've sang since before I could speak. My mum always tells me that before I was actually speaking conversations, I was singing.
Yeah, we made beer before we made bread.
So, like, yeah, I mean, although I am very technically proficient on the saxophone and known for that, I'm also, not many people have heard me play guitar, but I'm equally as proficient.
With the closing of that particular record, what is next for Karl D'SIlva to do the terrible third person?
Well, I'm just going to make more music.
More.
Yeah. I mean, I've already got more songs that are sat on my hard drive, which will need to be turned into real versions like they are that you've heard on the EP, and I'm hoping to do that very soon. And I'm always writing as well. I've constantly got at least 5 of them just in my head at all times, just in there, just churning away.
They're unruly beasts.
Yeah, they're like unruly kids, just in my head. Feed me.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
And playing live, like I want to do, like my only show that I probably will do this year, because obviously of current world events, was supporting Wrangler, at the White Hotel, and that was a real step up for me in terms of the sort of shows that I want to be doing. I will, the ideal point will be to do songs live with like 3 or 4 other musicians.
Yeah, I think that is going to be.
I'm fortunate enough that I know, some of the greatest musicians that we have in the UK. So I'm sure I'll be able to cobble together a ragtag group of people to help me with that.
I reckon you're going to, and I don't think I'm alone in expressing a lot of excitement to hear what comes next. But before that, I urge anybody who's listening to get your hands on Disappear. It's easy enough to find Karl on Bandcamp. Are there any other things you would like to, anything else, any other ways of getting in touch or contact, or anything you'd like to say before?
Right, so you can get the EP by going to bandcamp.com/KRLDSLV. I'm on Instagram, and that's my handle as well. So at KRLDSLV, it's just my name with all the vowels taken out of it. And then I'm on Twitter with that handle as well, if you want to keep in touch with what I'm doing.
Got to be done. Right. Thank you very much, Karl. That was absolutely delightful. So with any luck, this state of affairs will be concluded, by which I mean the fact that we're all stuck in our living rooms. You're in your dressing gown. I'm in my purity pants, which honestly, it's a good job the camera can't see them, because it would be the living end. And that's that. So I hope anyone who was listening, enjoyed this first attempt for the Black Stage blog to have a live interview. With any luck, there'll be more in the future. But all remains to say is thank you very much, Karl.